Lindsey Graham has just died. U.S. Senator, South Carolina. He's died at age 71. Just a couple of days ago, maybe a day ago, he was in Ukraine and trying to get technology to support Ukraine. And the next day, he's dead. And he was trying to pass the SAVE Act. Trump claims that he was going to get a way to get the bill passed, and all of a sudden he's dead. Now, is there anything nefarious to this? No, probably not. It probably was just a heart attack, and things happen with heart attacks. People's health can deteriorate very quickly, even if they seem fine the day before. And I was just watching a video of him talking, and he looked completely fine. He looked like I don't know how he usually does. Uh, and I think it's important to say that we have to let the people who do die of old age in the Senate, even if they were too old to be there to begin with, let them rest in peace and pray for their families and pray for them, even posthumously. Now, one of the things I really wanted to talk about in this video was politically disagreeing with somebody over their position on particular issues. So, for me, I'm not a big proponent of the war industry, or I'm not pro war. I'm not a person who is a proponent of, I wouldn't say the Ukraine war, because Lindsey Graham's position on Ukraine was hawkish for my standards, but it was changing. In all honesty, it was getting more like support to Ukraine to be able to push Russia into making a peace. Um, but if you look at a lot of Lindsey Graham's um, other political movements in regards to other wars that have happened in the past, things like Iraq or Afghanistan, Lindsey Graham, and even Trump's first term, Lindsey Graham's always been a big proponent of a lot of these wars. And there have been people like Mitt Romney and Susan Collins and a lot of these sorts of senators like Richard Blumenthal, people like this who are quite entrenched within the establishment and then would say something like, oh, we're only spending a couple percent of our military budget to weaken Russia. And this is a reason why it's an investment to be able to uh, stop somebody, stop Russia in this case from really doing anything politically. And Lindsey Graham's always been a general supporter of this. Even now, he's basically saying, okay, now he's dead, but he was saying, well, we give Ukraine technology, we give them all the tools to sort of succeed. We just don't really give them the money, really, or it'll be paid back. That was the idea to get a sort of peace quicker. And I wanted to talk about like legacy of disagreeing with positions like that and how to handle these people after their deaths and really differentiating um, still a patriotism you disagree with and a patriotism that you wholeheartedly agree with. So, what I would say about Lindsey Graham is like he is a complicated man. Uh, but if you look at his history, he was in, you know, active service until he was 50 something years old, in his mid 50s or his late 50s. Um, he was enlisted, and I think that that's a truly respectable calling and vocation that many people would just, discard after, they get something in return from it. And I respect Lindsey Graham heavily for being one of those people who are in the military. Another thing is He was a man who had a family, you know, and they loved him. There was no uh, nothing bad ever said about him in his personal life. He hadn't committed any crime. Um, as a senator, he wasn't really worth much money. He's been in the Senate for decades at this point, and I think he was only worth $1 million in net worth, and that's probably just from his, I don't know, military stuff, rather than any of his senator salary or something like this. So he's not one of these people to get rich off of the Senate, and I really respect things like that in people. So something I couldn't be over his career more opposite on, like his foreign policy compared to um, what he's actually done in his career. Um, that I think is something that we need to respect about him. And I think it shows that I'm begrudgingly saying this because I'm not a fan of his personality, but he was a patriot. He was a man who, loved his family, loved America. He just did it a different way than somebody like me or many other Americans would prefer, especially in the younger generation, such as myself. And you know, people like Lindsey Graham grew up in the Cold War era. Grew as a senator, and they're more sensitive to issues like this, to where young folks aren't. And I think that a lot of the time the younger generation says about the old generation, well, the old people don't represent us anymore and they don't understand us. And there's grains of truth to that, of course, sure. But the other side also applies to where, like, a lot of young people don't understand what the old people went through. And even though a lot of those methods are outdated, they still apply and they were still real issues at the time. And people just sometimes fail to get out of mindsets whenever their mind is set on something. And I don't think that makes you less of a patriot. It can make you wrong, or it can make you misguided, or anything like that. But it, there's nothing you can say against that, per se. I think, again, Lindsey Graham, I didn't, he's not my senator, he's not my representative, but all in all, as a whole, he was a man who was a thorn in Trump's side in his first term, and in his second term, uh, especially, he became more of a team player. Um, and in the second half of his first term, and that was why Trump, one of the first senators, if not the first, that he endorsed in 2026 for the running was Lindsey Graham, because he's one of these senior senators. He was one of the senior senators who was able to get and whip votes. And that's what a patriot does. He'll talk to people who are more anti-Trump, who are anybody, and try and get something through. And regardless if you agree with the Trump agenda or you disagree, that's what your senator is meant to do. He's meant to whip votes and get the damn legislation through. And I think Lindsey Graham was one of the very best in the Senate for that. He wasn't corrupt with money, yet he was still in the budget committee. There have been plenty of senators been in there for a fraction of the time Lindsey Graham has been, and are like 20 times richer without starting rich coming into the Senate. There are plenty of examples that come to mind. And I think we honestly have to, like, broaden our scope of what patriotism is, um, and be open to disagreeing with people, just even if even if they're totally wrong on an issue like Lindsey Graham was on war, for example. We don't have to agree on everything. And I think honestly, I hope his family is doing well, and I hope he's in a better place. But yeah, I mean, we really need to, as a country, re calibrate what patriotism really is. We need to have the scope of that um, broadened and see it from other people's point of view, because I will never understand him on foreign policy. I will never understand. but he comes from a different time. He comes from a different place. And America is a big country, and people grow to their beliefs in different ways. You know, he must have seen stuff that I've never seen. So different opinions can formulate based off of your circumstances. So I think um, I think people really need to keep that in mind when talking about patriotism.